Hey, Childfree family and friends. Cody here. Welcome to Childfree Family's presentation, Let's Talk Money. This is episode 2 on FIRE, which is Financial Independence Retire Early, and FILE, Financial Independence Live Early. I'm Cody Hetzel, the founder for Childfree Family, co-founder of the Childfree Convention, and all-around participant in pretty much anything surrounding the child-free lifestyle and topics. Quick shout out to the Childfree FIRE group on Facebook. They'll be with us today as well, and I'm an admin there. So joining me today is Dr. J. Dr. J and his wife are both child-free. They've been married 12 years. He has a PhD in adult learning from the University of Connecticut and is a certified financial planner. A key thing to note about Dr. J is he is a fiduciary, which means he must put the needs of his clients above his own interest. And on top of that, he is an advice-only and fee-only certified financial planner. So in other words, he is paid for his time by his clients. He doesn't receive kickbacks, commissions, incentives for selling products or recommendations. So a client pays him for his time, his advice, and he helps those guys manage their own finances, which could include investing. Dr. J, leave anything out?
No, that's good. I do have to say, Cody, I saw you guys yesterday having the debate on how to spell child free and how to do the term during the convention. I'm going to go down as saying it's one word.
One word.
Capital C.
I'm in the one word camp too. I think it's one word as well. Just a reminder to our audience, this is live. This is happening right now. It will be archived in the future and available on the Childfree Family YouTube page. But for now, it's live. So if you want to jump in and join us in the conversation, put a question or a comment, and we'll see if we can get to it and answer it as well. So before we dive too far in, let me get through this fun part, the disclaimer. The following views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are for entertainment and educational purposes only. Please seek the assistance of a professional to aid you in your financial decisions. We're just two guys having fun. With that, so today's talk is going to be on FIRE and FILE. And before we even can get into those exact things, what are we looking at for a starting point? What's the jumping off point before someone can even say, okay, I want to get on the journey of FIRE or FILE?
Yeah, so when you're looking that far ahead, you're really talking about the future. And I don't know about you, but I don't think 20 years in the future as well as I probably should. But the reality is, if you don't have a solid foundation, whatever your target is in the future can be an issue. So one of the things, I'm doing some research right now, talking with child-free individuals on their finances. And one of the things that's interesting is child-free folks as a whole have less debt than the general population. If you look at credit cards, my data is saying that about 20% of child-free folks have a credit card or carry debt on it, while over half or more have debt on a credit card. So the first thing to me is getting out of debt. And what do you think about that, Cody?
So it's basically like a 1 out of 5 for the child-free folks versus like 1 out of 2 for the rest of the population. That's basically what it says. In a way, it makes sense. Like it kind of follows that narrative that people, believe that if you don't have kids, you have more disposable income, and that doesn't always translate to using that finance to the best of its ability, following the budget like we talked about last time in episode 1. It's interesting, but it's also along the other stereotype of the fact that everyone thinks, oh, you're child free, well then you must have just tons of money. But that 20%, do you know the numbers on like the different dollar amounts by chance? Like what's the average amount of debt that a parent carries versus a child free person?
I don't have all the stats, but there was just a national survey done, and they found that less than half of the people in the U.S., general population, which includes child-free and parents, can afford $1,000 emergency. Which $1,000, I mean, I had a pipe go this weekend, and I had to do that repair. If I couldn't do it myself, that was gonna be a lot more than $1,000 emergency. So if people don't even have $1,000 for when stuff happens, which it does, that becomes an issue.
And that's when the debt starts building up, because people just, I'll just put it on my card and I'll do the minimum amount and let the snowball start building.
Yeah, and that's what most people said. Hey, I'll just borrow somehow to get through that emergency. And then what happens is, if I got 10 grand in debt, putting another $500 on it, I'm already in a hole. And you just get stuck in that mentality. And I do want to comment on something you brought up there, Cody, is people go, well, you're rich, you're child free, you got to be rich. So I'm looking at the data. Interesting part is that single childless women do have the highest net worth by about 20 grand when you're looking at people in the U.S. over 55.
Wait a minute. Wait, so single childless women have a higher net income or net worth
at 55.
Okay.
By the way, that net worth, I'm just grabbing the stats, I'll throw it in the chat, is about $160,000. So it's not huge.
Yeah.
When we're talking about FIRE, we're going to be talking about some big numbers, but it's about $20,000 more than parents. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I mean, it's the first time I'm hearing this statistic, and it's kind of mind blowing because you hear a lot about the wage gap and the glass ceiling and the differences in pay for men and women. So to hear that a single child-free woman has a higher net worth, then that's the top of the financial wealth food chain. Like they are the pinnacle. I mean, in a way, it's great news. Like that's pretty amazing. That's a cool way to buck the norm.
Yeah, and it's interesting because statistically, it's actually not a difference. The parents are coming in just below about 150, and that's based on census data. So that's pretty good data. But it also says that a lot of people, and they're elderly, don't have a lot of money. $150,000 is not going to get you through retirement. When on average in the U.S., it's going to cost you $250,000 for health insurance, unreimbursed health insurance. That means you have Medicare. It's $250,000 after that, just for medical issues. And
that's where the parents look at their kids as their future caretakers, either physically or financially. And as child-free individuals planning for the future, we don't have that scapegoat, I guess, to look at. So we've got to plan for ourselves, and that's
So that same report from the census found 2.5% of child-free folks get any financial support from their family after 55, which I'm not really surprised. That kind of sounds right. Only 1.5% of parents get any support.
And I think we covered that in the last episode. And to see that difference as well, it in a way, it kind of doesn't make sense. It's like, okay.
The bottom line is your future is determined by your financial decisions. And what happens is debt is stealing from your future. If you look at average credit card debt's about 16%. Over time, S&P averages about 10%. Now, don't quote that as an investment number. That's just a general average. So if you take the money and invest it, you're already in the hole 6% versus paying down that debt.
Yeah. The debt's just going to eat it away. It's going to erode anything that you make unless you have a substantial year, which, good for you if you do. But the rolling the dice on that, the 16% debt, it's always going to be there. And it can potentially get worse. Credit card companies can change their rates. You sign that little paper saying so. In my state, it can go up to 29.9%. Like that's as high as the government will let them go, and you better believe they'll go to it. So I don't foresee the stock market having that big of a swing on a regular basis to make up for that. So I mean debt is a big killer for people planning for their future, for sure.
Yeah, and I think what's happening is we've had 3 great years for the market back to back. The S&P over the last 3 years is up about 96%, which means if you put your money in about 3 years ago, you'd almost double it. On average, the S&P does 10%. So we are nowhere near the average over the last 3 years. So if you've gotten used to, I can beat 16%, well, the rule of averages is eventually it's going to come back down to that average percentage. And that's, if you're counting on using debt to get you ahead in the future, it's not going to work. To everyone living in the future watching this that's been archived, we're in 2022. So while you're in your flying car watching this, while it's driving itself or flying itself,
Yeah, so that we're talking about the recent market from 2022.
Yeah. So here's the other fun stat for you. For most credit card companies, if you pay the minimum payment and don't add any debt to it, it'll take you 10 years to pay off that credit card.
Is that kind of like a average that people would look? Is that their magic number? It's like, okay, if you just pay the minimum, yeah, you'll pay it off in 10 years. You'll pay the balance, and that's again not adding new debt on top of what it is. That's like hitting your credit limit and then saying, okay, just paying down the minimum every month.
Yep.
Is that
what happens is at 16%, about every 5 years, that credit card debt will double. So what's happening is you feel like you're making progress, but paying the minimum barely or might not even cover the interest payment.
Wow.
Yeah.
Food for debt thought.
So the second part before we get into FIRE and F.I.L.E is this debate on buying a house. And one of the things I'm finding in the data is that child-free folks are more likely to rent because they have flexibility. They're like, look, why be tied down? I don't have to worry about the school system. I can, if I get a job somewhere else in the in the other side of the country, I can just move. But people then go, and I think there's a little bit of house fever out there going, but you have to have a house to get ahead. What do you think about that, Cody?
It's the old adage. It's like, you invest in real estate. Real estate's always going to go up. Again, don't quote me. We had a disclaimer, but it's like real estate's always going to go up. It's a safe investment type of thing. So to hear that the majority of child-free people are renting, it's like a few different thoughts coming in. It's like, number one, are they renting because they're unable to qualify for a house? Do they have too much current debt, student debt already built up, hitting the job market to where, they have to rent? But like you said, they also want to remain flexible. If they need to, take that job from LA to New York, they can up and do it, and not have to worry about going through the process of selling a house and then also buying another house or what's going to be the next step there. So it's interesting to hear that the majority of people are renters, but I can see where they might have to be given their debt situation. Like, is it based on debt or is it based on the choice for flexibility?
It's probably a bit of both. So Gen X and Y, which is where I do a lot of my work, on average, will have 7 significant career changes in their life. And what we're seeing is people aren't getting raises. Let's just be real. They're getting supposedly cost of living raises, but if you got less than 7% last year, you lost money because inflation is up 7%. And most people did not get a 7% raise. So the way you get a raise is by moving companies. Used to be, I don't know about you. So I'm 43. And when I started in the career world, they said, well, you're going to be a job jumper if you're there for less than like 5 years or some stupid number like that. Nowadays, if you make it 2 years, you're a long timer.
Yeah. It's like, worry about your resume. You can have so many jobs on your resume in this day and age. It's
Those employers, if you don't show up because you got hit by a bus, they'll post your job the day after. So, that gives you an idea of how much loyalty there is.
Well, and some things that I've seen and read as well, the most companies, they would almost rather hire from the outside anyway. And anyone who's, worked in, a corporate world, you see a job opening come up within your company. You're like, oh, I can totally do that job. I have all the qualifications. They know me. They know what I can do. I'm going to apply. And then they hire somebody from outside the company. And they do it for a number of reasons. Number one, it may have been a competing company, so they want that person's intel on that company. They don't necessarily want to move up from within, because if they move you up, now they have to hire for your job. And sometimes it's easier to hire, across the stream versus bringing someone up from the pipeline. And so people who think they're going to sit in a job for, 10 years even, with any kind of upward mobility or vast increases to their personal income, is almost hard to find.
Yeah, the day of doing 25 years and getting the watch is gone.
Yeah,
it is. So if you truly want to be on this FIRE or F.I.L.E path, you've got to be able to jump to that next job. And I'm seeing people get almost 50% raises by jumping to other jobs. I mean, huge. Maybe they're taking going to a startup, they're getting some equity. They're getting huge jumps by making that move. And they might be moving, I'm in Texas today and I got to move to Washington. Who cares?
Mhm.
because they can do that. So that's part of the picture on renting. The other part of it is housing prices are crazy right now.
Yeah, they
Uh,
are.
my wife and I just moved from Connecticut to Mississippi, and we were fortunate to find a house here. But the price difference between the two were huge.
Mhm.
You could get almost triple the house in Mississippi that you get in Connecticut. And Connecticut's
Mhm.
one of those where that just the house values are crazy. Well, if you're going to buy a house and you're going to do it right, the first thing you do is get out of debt. Well, many people are not debt. The
Mhm.
second thing is have 20% down. Well, 20% down is going to prevent you from getting private mortgage insurance, going to get you a better rate.
Mhm.
So in the US, with an average house somewhere around $300,000, you got to be out of debt and have 60 grand in cash
Mhm.
to buy the house right.
Yeah, and the housing prices are up pretty much everywhere. Like there used to be a lot of like clickbait style stories where it's like oh, someone moved from New York from a 300 square foot apartment to a Victorian mansion in Charleston, South Carolina. Those stories have kind of gone away because everything is so high up everywhere. Like you can still do that probably, but it doesn't seem like they're as prevalent these days. At least I don't see those kinds of things as much.
Yeah, and I think the problem is, so when you chose to be child free, you chose not to follow the life script.
Mm.
Okay. The same life script says you buy a house where you grew up, you stay in the community for the rest of your life, and you work a job there for 25 years.
Uh-huh. And get your watch.
And that's not happening.
Yeah.
Most people cannot afford a house in the same community they were brought up in because there's a certain quality of life that came over time. And let's be
Mhm.
real, our parents bought houses for a lot cheaper than we did.
Mhm.
it just was. So renting is an option, but you need to plan on. Last year, it was almost 15% that rents went up year over year.
Mhm.
That's the downside. You don't have control of that. The upside is if the pipe breaks and you're renting, you place a phone call and go, not my problem.
Mhm.
You
Well,
know,
and with today's job market, with a lot of jobs becoming a work from home type of a job, being able to rent it does make more sense because a lot of like small town America, towns and cities, they're losing their population because it's aging out and dying, and the younger people can't find a job to work in that area, and so they move to a city. Well, now they may be able to move back and get that big city money and even live in their old hometown or in a small town in rural America somewhere and be able to do it. But even then, they might not be looking to buy just because they say, "Hey, this has worked once for me. I'm gonna, you know, roll the dice, and if I have to do it again, I'll up and move somewhere else." But it seems like that's the really one of the only edges that people have is that ability to be flexible, work from home, and live somewhere that is like on the renting financial scale below your means. Like try to find that balance if you can, and that's like a way to get a leg up.
and the same goes with buying a house. If you can work
Mhm.
remotely, you have a lot more options.
Yeah.
So, my wife and I, we moved. Our house in Connecticut was costing us, sit down for this one, $12,000 a year in property taxes alone.
Mhm.
So that's $1,000 a month just for taxes. We moved to a rural county in Mississippi, and our taxes here a year are $1,800.
Don't tell them. Don't raise your taxes.
And I've got now 33 acres and a pond. Okay,
Yeah.
I've got my own homestead,
Yeah.
and like when they sent me the tax bill, I'm like, did you miss a zero here? Is there a typo? But
Dr.
what it
J,
is,
shut up. Don't tell them.
what it is, I'm in the middle of nowhere. Let's
Yeah.
be real. There's no food that delivers here, but I do have gigabit Ethernet, so I can do
Hey,
my full job.
Andrew,
Fiber, it doesn't matter.
bonus.
So there are those options, and I think the hard part is if you're going to look at like a F.I.L.E life or something along those lines, you're going to make sacrifices now for the future.
You almost have to, unless you're set up with it so far, unless you're like getting that trust fund or you're in a job that you're making so much more money than you're even able to try to even want to spend. But if you're, just working atypical job with atypical debts, like, yeah, you have to make sacrifices to begin the investment portion. Again, getting back to what you said about debt, you have to take care of the debt first and then look at that financial investment portion or dip your toes in at least, especially if you have a company that does do a retirement match, take advantage of that. In my opinion, personal opinion, you'd want to take advantage of that as well. But yeah, I mean, that debt will just eat you alive.
Yeah. The hard part is the match is free money.
Mhm.
So, if you can get to the match and just check that off and then pay your debt, probably makes sense.
Yeah.
But I've got some people that have credit cards and they're 20, 30%. I mean, your state has a max, others don't. And that's actually tied to a prime rate, which we know interest rates are going up this next year.
Mhm.
So at some point, you need to make some sacrifices.
Yeah.
There are those debt experts who say, while you're in debt, you don't see the inside of a restaurant unless you're working there.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a Dave Ramsey thing. Not everybody likes him, but that's just, he's got a point. You're paying 23% on that $50 bill that restaurant was now for the next 10 years.
Yeah. Well, so talking about making sacrifices, let's start to dive into the topic here. So we've got FIRE, financial independence, retire early. Give people kind of the nuts and bolts of what that is, if they maybe have not heard of it and they've just stumbled across this.
So before I go there, Cody, why don't you, since you lead the Childfree FIRE, how do you define FIRE? Because there's more than one definition of this.
Everyone does have their own kind of feel of what FIRE is, and I kind of fell into it. Like, it's almost like with Childfree. Like, before I knew that I was child free, I was child free. Like, it just kind of naturally happened, just because of the way that my wife and I were already living our life. We didn't have a child. We didn't want a child. And so, there's a community for us. It exists. It's called Childfree. Awesome. Kind of the same thing with FIRE. Kind of looking at our situation and, having spoken to, financial planners in the past and feeling like we're a little bit of an anomaly. Like, I start researching that. It's like, why are we so different? Is it just because we don't have kids or whatnot? And it's like, no, it's because we've both been, fairly frugal people. We're both savers and invest when we can and where we can and try to do it smartly and don't carry any debt. And that just fell right into what I found was FIRE. But again, like you're saying, there are different ways to go about achieving FIRE or utilizing FIRE. And so, yeah, I just kind of found the FIRE community just by here I am.
Yeah, and there's kind of two people that come to FIRE. It's either they fell in, kind of like what you're talking about, or it was something they found and they're like, oh, I'm going to go in that direction. And FIRE at its core is two things: financial independence and then retiring early. And I separate those intentionally. So financial independence, the old school way of calling this, and I apologize, was FU money, where you could just do whatever you want because you don't have to worry about the point where you get to a point where, hey, I'm doing my job and I hate it. I can go, I'm out.
Yeah.
And either go to another job if I want or retire. That's not financial independence. It's beyond, it's not living paycheck to paycheck is at one extreme. Financial independence at the other extreme.
Yeah.
Of you got enough money that if you take the time off, you're okay. Or you change your plans or you go back to school. The retire
you can take a sabbatical for 5 years. Yeah.
Just good luck getting back in the market after being out 5 years. That's a job market problem. So the retire early is not saying you got to retire at 40, 50, 32. It's not an age. It is, I've got enough money that I don't have to worry about it for the rest of my life. Now, the hard part of that is a lot of FIRE is based on general rules, and most general financial rules were based on having kids. So when I did my CFP, there was nothing in there about being child free. So any general rule is going to have them in the picture. So you got to be careful on that. And you'll see people talking about a 4% safe withdrawal rate. That's the FIRE number. But what that is there's a lot of data that looks at it, and there's some debate on if it's 3.5%, 4% or whatever it is. But the general concept is if it's 4%, I can take 4% out of my investments every year and I should be fine. That's based on a 30-year life cycle. Now, if you're retiring at 40 and you're going to live to 100, that math may or may not work. And it also partially depends on luck. If you retired right before the market dove and you stayed at 4% while it was in this market that's not so great for a while, it's going to be tough. So that's the hard part with the 4% rule is it's hard and fast. And then The opposite side of that as well. If you have 25%, 25 times what you want to take home, you've got to hit your number. Those are the general rules. But what that doesn't take into account is the market doesn't just go in a straight line.
Yeah.
And your spending doesn't go in a straight line. And your life doesn't go in a straight line. I'm working with somebody right now whose father has Alzheimer's. And Alzheimer's care for 5 years could be up to $1 million.
Yeah.
If your FIRE number was 2 million and you take $1 million out of it for either caring for yourself or an elderly parent, you're back to work.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's if you had removed yourself because you thought you were retired. And like you said, getting back into the game and you've had a huge time lapse from your last job and you try to get into the same field, your field may have changed completely.
Or you get and let's be real, there is discrimination based on age. You've been out of the market 5 years and now you're over whatever, 40, 50, whatever. And now like, well, I'm not really sure. You're going to retire in a few years. I'm not sure I want to
invest the money in you. Yeah.
It goes downhill. What I'm finding, and I'll put a link in the chat, with child-free folks is many more of them are doing what I call FILE, financial independence, live early.
Okay.
So FIRE is a on-off switch for work. FILE is kind of a dimmer switch. It's getting to choose to spend the time at work if you want, or actually it turns out in child-free there's a higher percentage, it seems to be, of people's small businesses, and doing what you enjoy early on, which actually changes your trajectory. Because if I'm going to live a FILE life, I'm going to actually have some income coming in over time. I just might choose to do it from a beach instead of nice cold, Northeast winters as I used to. But now what happens is it's not just about shutting off work. And what do you think, Cody? I mean, are you a FILE or a FIRE person? You think?
Again, like I'm even the admin of one of the groups for Facebook's Child-Free FIRE population community, and yeah, I would say I would lean definitely more towards the FILE because I am doing work. Like I'm not just drinking a Mai Tai and hanging out on the beach every day. I'd be bored. I don't know. Like I want to do something, and if I'm able to also make a little money on the side and add to that little retirement nest egg, then why not?
Yeah, I just had a great conversation with somebody who had retired, child-free, and then decided to go back to work because just like, what do I do? And he's much better than I am because he set a boundary. Works 25 hours a week, no Fridays, and never before 10 a.m.
Boundary. That's a great idea. What a novel idea.
and I pushed him. I said, hey, what happens if a client says they got to meet, 8 a.m. in the morning? He goes, I don't.
Yeah.
He says he lost one client because of that. And I'm like, man, he's better than I am because he can set that boundary.
Almost in a way, though, that's kind of like the give take. Like you want to work with him because he's keeping his clientele so much on point. It's like you don't want to fall off. Like you want to stay with him. So it's
and on the flip side, so I'm talking to some people. Interestingly enough, Cody, I don't know. I got to look at the data, but I think there's just as many people that fall into FIRE as plan on FIRE. And part of that might be because the FIRE movement itself, you can get a Mr. Money Mustache, probably get some credit for it. There's a few others, but 5-10 years is when it's been popular.
And that's relatively new as far as,
So if you were planning on, if you're 50 or 55 and you're retiring early, that movement probably wasn't even there. So a lot of people, looked into it. And you made me think of this one person I interviewed. She said, real simple. She came to the U.S. She was an immigrant, got out of debt immediately, never went back to it in her life. Maxed out her 401k.
Yeah.
That's it. She retired at 50.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, beautiful. Yeah. She didn't have a plan. She didn't they joke about FIRE people getting, scrimping and saving so much that they're making their own soap or, she didn't do any of that. She just got out of debt, maxed out her 401k, got the match. The market did well for her. But at 50, she's like, I'm out.
But she did have some discipline in her finances as well to not go and spend beyond her means and and to get back into debt. It's kind of like the situation I was in, where it's like I just really avoid debt at all costs. Like if I have to buy something, I would rather either, not like anyone pays cash, but I know I have that cash available to literally pay off that credit card at the end of that month. It's like, yeah, I'm not going to carry anything. I just choose not to. And, I just don't, I'm not the first wave of like tech kind of guy. I don't have to have the newest stuff. Like literally, like I think our TV is a flat screen. It's probably like a whatever 2006 or 2007 model, but man, things working fine. So, but when it goes, yeah, I can go buy a new one. But that's because that's the life I live. Every 5 years, I don't need a new TV.
Yep. And so here's the thing, though. Stay out of debt, max out your retirement. By the way, there's some things we can do with taxes there, and we can talk about some of that.
Yeah.
But stay out of debt, max your retirement. It's not sexy. It's basics.
Well, and a lot of people they think, and you kind of mentioned it, is to achieve FIRE or even FILE, is that you have to sacrifice. You must sacrifice. You're not able to live your best life, and that's where you get into like fat FIRE and different terms that they have. So what are your thoughts on that, as far as what's the negative aspect of trying to achieve FIRE that people look at, where they're like, oh no, I'm never going to try to do FIRE. If it happens, it happens, or I'll just wait and retire at 65 or whatever it's going to be.
So in actuality, what I hear from most people is, I'll never retire.
Yeah.
And some people get very negative about it, kind of like, I'm going to work until my grave. Mm-hmm. And others are, I don't know what I would do if I retired. Those are two different
camps.
Yeah. Then we have the FIRE folks that are, I've had a good conversation with a few people, seem to be in their 40s a lot. They say, when I started work, I decided I don't want to do this and I just want to retire. And you got people that are working 12, 15 hours a day. I mean, burning it out in order to get to that FIRE goal.
Right.
The downside of that is, did you miss your life somewhere in there?
Yeah.
And that's okay if that's what you want to do. So I did my bachelor's degree in 9 months. So I've done let's make our life suck for a short period of time to get a goal. But for what purpose?
Yeah, delaying gratification, essentially. It's like, well, we'll tighten our belts and work hard. Like we'll pick up this second job or do whatever, and kind of work as hard as we can through our 30s and even into our 40s. But then by like 45, maybe we can just not have to work ever again, and we can, take a trip here or cruise there or whatever and enjoy life and do what we want to do. But again, life throws curveballs, so you never know what's coming down the pipeline. It just depends on maybe your personal outlook on life. Like, we all, some people, like, they plan to live to be 100. Like, I'm going to be 100, and they have to plan their life accordingly. Some people are like, man, I don't want to live to 100. Like, I want to enjoy life, and whatever happens, happens. If a meteor hits me and I die, then there you go.
And the truth is, we need to be somewhere in the middle. We need to not make the pennies squeak because we're pushing them that hard, and we don't need to spend everything we got. So that's a hard balance because, as humans, we talked about budgeting last time. That sets guidelines that we can just kind of work within. But the problem with FIRE is, if all we're looking at is the end, we sacrifice things on the way, maybe too much. Or if that's okay with you, that's fine. But the last thing you want is your relationships to fall apart or your health to fall apart because you're burning it too fast. And I think what's happened in the U.S. is we're glorifying hustle culture. You got to hustle. You got to have a job. You got to have a side gig. You got to have. Okay, at what cost? And because we're child free, we can get away with it because, we don't have like some little person saying, hey, come to our soccer game. So what happens is we're like, well, we can work longer hours. You're right. But to what point? Adding more zeros to the account does not make you happier. You're not taking the money with you. It's hard. And what I try to work with people on this FILE concept is, can you tune up your work so you're not miserable and still get to your goals? So for example, if you come to me, Cody, and say, hey, I hate my job, but I only have to do it for 5 more years and then I can retire. I go, do you really want to hate your job and hate your life for 5 years? Yeah. Or can you change now and live early because you have the financial independence? Another one that's common in couples And there's some tweaks on whether or not you're married or not on taxes.
Sure.
In couples that are child free, often I say, hey, you can live on one salary.
Mhm.
So if one of you wants to take some time and follow your passion, that's fine. My wife and I, we follow, we call it, the gardener and the rose. Everybody gets to turn at the rose and everybody has to be the gardener at times. And the gardener takes care of all the support things.
Yeah.
So if I say, hey, my spouse can, follow their passion, open their cupcake shop, whatever, it might not be the best financial decision, but it might be the best decision personally and for, their life,
Mhm.
but it's going to push off retirement. But if you're happier running your cupcake shop,
Mhm. Yeah. Well, and from just a child-free standpoint, looking at it from, for most parents, they almost have to have two incomes. Like they almost have to just not even to maintain, just to float and bob above water. Like it's just, yeah. I mean, I feel for them. Like that's tough. That's why I love being child-free for one reason.
well, I think the other thing I've seen in a few of the groups in the discussion, they go, well, you know, maybe some people call it a middle class work ethic, where you just have
Yeah.
to always be busting your butt. I'm a bit of I like studying history. It's actually goes back to a Puritan or Protestant work ethic. That's where it came from, and it was actually a cornerstone of capitalism. You work really hard, you'll get ahead. Not completely true right now. I'm just
Yeah.
saying,
Yeah.
working harder is not necessarily going to make you more money. So I'm saying, well, let's follow Scrooge McDuck and work smarter, not harder. And find that balance. And I don't know. The hard part is what happens once you get your goal. What happens when the dog catches the car?
And that's where like my wife and I are at right now. We call it working class guilt. Like we've worked like hard. Like we've worked to where we are now, and now we're at a point to where we don't have to work as hard, but we feel like we have to work. Like I was the kind of kid where if I was sick and I couldn't go to school, like it bothered me because I knew that I was going to have to catch up on all that homework. I never wanted to miss school. I always wanted to is this working? Is this working? And so it's always just been there with me. And fortunately, I found a partner that had the same mindset. But the downside of that is it's hard to pump the brakes. And like you said, to step into that file side of things, say, hey, let's live life and enjoy it a little bit. In our last episode, you talked about it when we're formulating a budget, like almost putting in a line item that's like have fun budget, like put in money and say, okay, you're going to spend this every month doing something fun, like blow it, like just do what doesn't matter. Like it's really for your mental health, if anything, and your sanity. So
Yeah.
that was a great takeaway for me.
Did you mention that one to your wife? Did she?
I did. She loved it.
I knew that was happening. So, so let me give you another example of that. Maybe I do the math on my budget and I can work 4 days a week instead of 5.
Yeah. But the trick is finding a job where you can do that too. Finding the boss that'll allow that to happen. But that might be one of the positive things that come out of what we just all went through with the pandemic, and working from home, working 4 days a week instead of 5 days a week, and getting more of that home lifestyle. So maybe that is a thing that'll work its way into the work ethic of the community. I don't know.
I don't know if we're going to get through in the work ethic. I just I struggle with this one. So I'll give you my midlife crisis. I'm here at the therapist office here with Cody is what it feels like. But when I hit 40, I had achieved most of my career goals, my academic goals, my personal goals. Married, happy, do my thing.
Dr. J.
And then I go, now what?
Yeah.
And I had this moment. So I remember it very clearly. My wife was working on her career, and we got that gardener in the row. So I was on more of the gardener role. And I hate to say it, but there is a gendered thing on who's doing support, and there's some cultural components that really bothered me. People thought it was a little weird that I was supporting my wife, but that's a separate discussion. But I had a moment, and I went, what do people do? And I started doing a lot of, and what I realized was, if you're a parent, your goals shift to the kid.
Always, yeah, as they should. But yeah.
Well, to an extent, because then it becomes, well, I'm going to get Cody into Yale or something.
You're right. Yeah. Yeah. There's an extreme there.
As somebody that's taught at Yale, I can tell you it's not perfect. But, we go into these extremes and we start pushing and living through the kids. So when we're child free and we don't, now what? And I'd always been goal driven. I went from no degree to PhD in 5.5 years. I mean, I'm goal driven. That's just part of who I am. And I did that while working full time. And I realized I don't really have goals anymore. My one goal, I guess, is I want to do the Great Loop. I don't know if you know that one. That's the boat all the way down the Mississippi, around the U.S. and all the way back. It's a huge, cool trip. But that's kind of I want to go on. That's a 6 months or a year travel. But what I did was I realized, okay, my goal now in life is to help others get to their goals.
Yeah.
Hence why I'm doing the financial planning stuff.
Sure.
But what happens though is there's something in you when you're like, I could retire. I don't have to work. But then what?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and in a way, like society would look at us and say, "Oh, it's like you're trying to fill that void of not having a child and fulfilling a legacy." And da 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 da. I mean, I feel that it's even beyond that. It's the fact, just like you said, it's just having a goal and something to drive yourself towards. Like whenever I go, like dust in the wind, footsteps in the sand, like I don't care. But if I can help people while I'm here, I want to do that. Like that I feel the same way as you. Like it's kind of a self-driven mission. If I can help someone along, I want to do that. And if it's just having these conversations within the child free community and someone gets a nugget of wisdom or information out of it, I mean, that's awesome. That's what I like.
Absolutely. And I had a great conversation. So because I have to have a goal or something, I don't know what I'm calling it. I'm working on a book on Childfree Wealth and I'm doing these interviews and surveys. And I just finished one and she had retired early at 50. And the first thing she did was help somebody with a business and start a small business because that's what you're expected to do.
Yeah.
And then she was like, what the heck did I just do? I got out of work and went back to work. And she's got some great questions she's asking.
And for free too. It's like almost you're just going to help someone. You're just going to help them anyway.
Yeah. So she's like, look, what she said was, at work, I used to look at my Outlook and I'd know 6 months from now what I have to do for the next 6 months. Mm-hmm. And then I retire and I don't have Outlook.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What do I do? And she's talking about it allows you to feel and hear the anxiety of life, because you don't often hear that when you're working, because it's just you're moving too fast. And now you start looking at, well, why am I here? And all those bigger questions. I don't have any answers for those.
Yeah.
But if you're going to go FIRE, gotta have something that you want to do. By the way, I have somebody else going FIRE and he's just going to do video games. And that's all he's going to do. He's going to play video games.
Play them. Hey, there you go.
That's fine. But, you just have to have something as that next step, because otherwise, that's why people do barista FIRE, just so they can go talk to people and have like a conversation with them, sometimes for the health insurance. But you have to have
what barista FIRE is. That's another one of the offshoots.
Yeah. So there's a whole bunch of, I swear people are just like trying to segment things. We go from lean FIRE, which means I'm going to live on ramen noodles, to fat FIRE, which means I have my own private chef. So there's somewhere in between. There's chubby FIRE. Barista FIRE is, hey, I'm going to, go have some job. It doesn't literally have to be a barista to have health insurance and maybe just for interaction. And I have a belief, look at the data. If the U.S. ever had universal health care, you'd see a whole lot of people FIRE the next day.
Yeah, you probably, yeah.
Because that healthcare cost, $15,000, $20,000 a year, is holding people back.
Well, that was one of the reasons that my wife and I were able to kind of branch out and become, entrepreneurs from the jobs we were doing, is we were able to tap into the, ACA and get insurance without going through like COBRA. For people that don't know, COBRA was pretty much the standard. If you don't have a job, you have to get COBRA insurance, and it is extremely expensive. But when the ACA came around and we were able to look at the incomes and everything involved, it was like the first year that it happened. So it was super juiced up and awesome. Like, yeah, it's like, I think it was less than like $50 a month for insurance for both of us. It's like, boom, let's start this business. And then off to the races.
By the way, that varies greatly state by state.
It does. It does. Yeah, that's in my state, my situation, my income, our ages. Yeah, it's a whole different animal for everybody. But for us, and like I said, at that time of our life, with where we were, it was like, yeah, it was like 50 a month, which was, and that's because we were getting subsidies because of the ACA.
Yeah, and the reality is, right now, you have to plan healthcare and long-term care as your part of your FIRE plan.
Mm.
I use $1 million as my number for taking care of me and my wife at the end of our life. The other interesting one, by the way, in child-free population, a lot of different age gaps. So my wife and I have a 7-year gap. That changes your FIRE plan too. What happens when somebody retires 10 years before the other person?
Yeah.
I don't know. Then does that cause issues, other things? But you need to have a plan for long-term care and health insurance until health insurance till at least 65, and then for those unreimbursed medical expenses beyond that. So let's talk a little about kind of how do you actually save for FIRE and how do you invest for FIRE? That sound good, Cody?
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
So 2 things for this. By the way, we're not going to talk about this stock is good or that stock's good. I can't do that. But what you need to do before you do any investing is know what you're investing in, why, how it works, and where you're going to invest. So the last thing you want, I love Cody, but if Cody says, hey, I got a great stock tip.
Yeah.
I need to understand what that is. We're hearing a lot with crypto now. People, oh, you got to do crypto.
There's a new crypto. There's a new crypto. Every day there's a new crypto. Like,
So my rule, if you want to be in crypto, is understand it. What is it? How does it work? How to invest? And then the other part is where, which accounts should you have it in? That's going to have a huge difference. So tax advantage accounts become a bonus. But the problem there is most of the retirement plans, 401ks, IRAs, you're normally going to get out at 59 and a half. Well, if you want to retire at 45, it's a little harder. You can do, there's a rule of 55, you get 55, and then there's a 72T election, which I'm not going to go into that one. It's a lot of math that figures out ways to get into that. By the way, if you're going to do that, hire somebody to help you on that, because that's not one you want to Google. Have you heard of that one, Cody? The 72T?
No, no. But if I ever have to, I'll be sure to Google it. I'm just kidding.
Essentially, you're doing a math to figure out how long and how many payments and over time and your life expectancy. It's keeping the math nerds happy. IRS doing their thing. So if you're child free, one of the things I just had an article on way child free finances are different. You might actually use different retirement accounts than a parent. The reason is a Roth. If you put the money in now, you pay the tax now, it comes out tax free. Bonus there for those FIRE folks is your contribution, as long as it's been in there 5 years, can be pulled out at any time. So if you're retiring at 45, you can pull out the contribution, not the growth. Then we have the traditional 401k or IRA. You're paying income taxes when that comes out. Well, 401ks are very popular in IRAs because people's plan is to pass that to the next generation. And unless you have over about $12 million a person, there's no tax on it. I don't know about you, but I don't want to pass anything to anybody. If I had my way, I'd have $100 in my hand as I got buried, and that's why I didn't know.
Don't let anyone know where you get buried. You'll get dug up.
I don't even care. So that will change your plan and also changes your taxes. So you have to have not only, hey, I want to do investing. By the way, the investing is the easy stuff. I send people Bogle's book on, the Little Common Sense book on investing. If you want to get crazy, you can read Random Walk Down Wall Street. Some of those easy books. You don't have to do anything fancy. My personal investment plan, not fancy. I have 10% that I keep for what I call gambling, which is where I invest in single stocks, or I want to try something, and then everything else, just in simple funds. You'd be surprised how simple my investing plan is, but that's because I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to learn everything about everything.
Set it, forget it. Yeah, you don't want the next thing coming out. Yeah.
But where you invest in which accounts becomes a big issue. Because that's going to also determine your taxes. So one of the ones that people don't often think about, right now at 72, when you hit in a 401k, you have to hit these RMDs, required minimum distributions. If you've saved for FIRE all your life, you may have RMDs that are hundreds and hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars that have to come out in those years, and you got to pay taxes right then and there.
Mm.
If it's a Roth or Roth 401k, Roth IRA, you can take a Roth 401k, 1k, put it in a Roth IRA. You don't have RMDs.
Mm-hmm.
Take it out when you want. And then people go, well, maybe I should also look at a taxable account. A taxable account, you're only paying capital gains tax, which is less in most cases than your income tax. So you need a mix of those. And what happens is, I get people all the time, well, where do I start? What do I do? I go, number one rule, learn.
Mm-hmm.
Just learn what you're doing, why you're doing it. If you want to learn on your own, great. If you want to pay somebody, the rule is you pay somebody that is a fee-only CFP. That means they're not getting money for commissions from anywhere else. And you can do what's called advice only. You just pay them to teach you. That's great. That way you're not paying an ongoing fee, 1.5% of your assets for the rest of your life or 1%. That's great. Always fee only, because remember, anyone can call themselves a financial advisor. They can be just selling you insurance or other things. So you want to either you can learn it yourself. You can have somebody help you. Both of those work, or combination between the two. But you want to you want to understand it. Because I just worry that people, when they get in this FIRE path, they're like, I want to FIRE tomorrow. So they start taking all of these risks on things that, some people have made a lot of money on the meme stocks. Some people lost a lot of money on the meme stocks.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you should invest in them or not. I'm saying understand them.
Mm-hmm.
Same with crypto. There are people that made millions and there are people that went broke.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just on the early side of that.
Yeah.
What's your reaction, Cody?
Yeah, I agree with you on everything that you pretty much just said. I mean, you educate yourself before you do it. Don't just do a knee-jerk reaction. Don't have that FOMO. Your fear of missing out. It's like, oh man, this stock is going crazy. I need to buy it or whatever. Or I heard this tip or something. Like, know what you're getting into. Know what you're investing in. And if you're going to work with someone that you feel like you have trust with. Whether they're a fiduciary or not, if there's someone that isn't fee-based and it's with one of those companies that you're going to go with, know what they're, I guess make sure they know who you are. Because as I mentioned in the last episode, being a Childfree person, my wife and I were an anomaly to both the financial planners that we've come across, because we don't fit the mold of what they think we need to be planning for, because we don't have to worry about the lineage and the offspring and like I said, make a statue of me when I'm dead with all the leftover money. I don't care. It's a tough thing for a lot of people to wrap their heads around. So work with someone who understands you is the other part of it. So educate yourself. If you're going to work with someone, no matter who it is, make sure they know who you are and understand what your goals are, and that they truly understand what that is. Not just, let me put your information in a computer and it's going to spit out you should be doing 10% here and 15% there and know what you're getting into for sure.
So I'm going to push back in a little bit, Cody, and I apologize.
That's fine.
Get a little technical on you. You should only be working with a fiduciary. A fiduciary means they have to put your interest ahead of their own. If they're not a fiduciary, they could be selling you stuff that they make good commission on. That's not the right choice for you.
I agree with that. The only reason I'm bringing it up is just for that devil advocate side of the Childfree person that works for ABC Corporation. They're like, oh, you're bashing my industry and my group or whatever. It's like, if people want to work with that kind of person, then they should know and they should ask. That should be literally one of the questions you ask any financial planner. You should ask, are you a fiduciary? Are you going to have a fiduciary responsibility with our interactions and with my future? And you should ask that question. And either if you want to hear yes and you don't hear it, then that's where you make your decision. So yeah,
I'm hard and fast on it, and I apologize. Every CFP has to be a fiduciary. Brokers can be what's called best interest, which is not always the same. The other thing I encourage you're right on the questions. Ask them, how is my financial plan different because I'm child free? If they don't have an answer, or they do the I don't know, run.
Yeah,
they're putting the same plan as everybody else.
Yeah.
It is different. The core of your plan is different. I'm not saying they have to be child free, because there's some people that aren't child free that understand it. But at the same time, if they're cookie cuttering a plan from somebody else, that's not good for anybody. But if they go, I don't know, what does it mean to be child free? Are you really going to be child free? Are you always going to be child? They start going down that path. It's not the right fit.
Yeah.
That I encourage everybody to find 2 or 3. But the other part of it is you can learn this on your own. The one thing that I will add in is a comprehensive financial plan looks at a lot of stuff. And one of the things the FIRE folks don't always think about is insurance. So one of the things, especially with child-free folks, I encourage everybody to get some disability insurance, because it's more likely that you're going to get disabled, have a stroke, a heart attack, trip, fall, break a leg, can't speak, and have to rely on that than life insurance for most child-free folks. Life insurance is covering somebody who needs your income after.
Yeah.
If me and my wife, if one of us can't work, we'd be okay because our budget will work, but that disability insurance will cover my income going forward. And people don't think about it. And they're usually pretty cheap. And if you pay for it out of pocket, when you get disability payments back, they're not counting it under taxes. It's all coming to you. So it only covers 60% or 70% of your salary, but you don't take taxes out.
Yeah.
So you need to be thinking about that. Same with FIRE folks. Make sure you have good house insurance, car insurance, umbrella insurance. But I don't sell any insurance, so
yeah, sure.
I'm not selling it.
Yeah.
But that's protecting you.
Again,
heaven forbid you're what's that?
Educate yourself. What we talk about, look into it.
Yeah, and the way I look at it is things happen. We've learned that recently. Your car crashed into somebody, and next thing you know, you got $1 million lawsuit on your hands. I have an umbrella policy. I just go to, hey, you take care of it and let me know when it's done. Versus my whole FIRE plan falls apart.
Yeah.
Because I don't have the insurance, including health insurance, all the others. So it's more than just investing. It's about knowing what your final goal is. It's about investing, taxes, insurance, estate planning, all of that together to have a FIRE plan.
Yeah, and we've kind of touched on a lot of different topics here. We talked about, FIRE and F.I.L.E, but, the investing, insurance, this debt and budgeting and everything along those lines. And so we want to keep this conversation going. This is episode 2. We plan on doing another episode. I believe episode 3, we're going to talk about debt management and the cycle of living paycheck to paycheck. And so if you feel like that might be a great conversation for you, we look forward to you guys all tuning in with us and listening in and join the conversation. Again, this is live until it's archived. So you can always throw out questions and ask us our opinions of it, and we'll give them to you within reason. And so with that, Jay, is there anything that you want to do a quick plug for? You got your book you're working on. Let folks know about that.
Yeah, I'm going to plug 2 things because we've talked about it. So for those who are interested in working with a financial planner, I am out there at childfreewealth.com. I offer a no-cost meeting for 60 minutes. So you can get to know me. I also do offer pro bono spots for those people when we talk about this paycheck to paycheck. Often work with the people that have medical issues and other things that have to dive in deep. And then the other one that I mentioned, so I talked about this research I'm doing, and I'm getting the data from you all. I'm fortunate. I've actually been able to complete about 200 surveys and 20 interviews for a book on Childfree Wealth. It's childfreewealth.com/book. I'd love you guys to fill out the survey, do the interview. If you do, you get a copy of the book. But more importantly, you're getting data that we can all use and make some decisions on that isn't out there. You guys just had that debate on how to use the word child free. I'm now going, what does that mean when you were added to wealth?
Yeah, we had a conversation. For those that might not know, the Childfree Convention, we have the Childfree Definition Project that we're just dipping our toes into to define what the term child-free means, should mean, means now. And yeah, we need data, and that's severely lacking that's out there. So yeah, I love data. Cody loves data.
We're both nerds that way, I guess.
So with that being said, guys, everyone, thank you for tuning in, giving us a watch. And yeah, we look forward to seeing everybody next time. And until then, peace out.